Here's the I have the nut together with starter cable, so that way I don't lose it. Then this, I have this the bus tube going to the starter with the nut just wrapped around it, and then this connector is a pinch and pull. That's the signal wire to the starter, and this is loose now, and I can take the top bolt off and now remove this bracket. So 13 millimeter. I'll leave it in there just so it's dangling right there. So that one is disconnected, and I can remove the top bolt for the starter, and then the last remaining I gotta remove these two, this bracket, and then the slave cylinder, which will be the last one. I will probably support the engine, remove the bolts at the bottom, and then come back to complete this. I don't know if there's a lot of brake fluid that's going to come out. Be prepared for that. Pretty much done here. So this connector is able to get it out by using a pick to go in here and push it down, and then quickly came up. That's done. Finally got the starter bolt out. A little hard than the other ones. This one is a long, really long one. It's 19 millimeter, and then this is where the harness bracket goes. This one. So the top one is out, and the power steering line is out. I think the bracket is connected to the bottom bolt. Pretty much everything's done except this bracket and then the slave cylinder. I'll remove the bracket now. The bracket is almost off. I have this bolt, and there's a nut right below that, and then here are the other one, both 13 millimeters. It comes off like so. And let's get the net off. So we are done. I think that's the last of it on the top, other than the slave cylinder, which I might remove it now before moving on to the bottom of the compartment. Supporting the engine with the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh engine support bar with the chain, and then a 1/2 inch metal rod going to the engine lift point. And the next step is to get the clutch slave cylinder off. It's a TT45 Torx, so I have that in there. That's one. The other one is here. I need both hands. So that's next. Once I'm done with that, taking this transmission mount, this 18 millimeter off, and then I can move on to the bottom of the engine. I have the car lifted, the Quick Jacks 7000 TL. I have the clutch slave cylinder off, zip tied to keep it away from the mount while I'm removing it. So on to the next step. This one I just sprayed with the lubricant. It's a WD-40. So gotta try. See, the engine is well supported. I tried my impact for the 18 millimeter transmission mount bolt. Didn't do anything. And now the cheater bar. You can see with the better leverage, I'm able to crack it open. The next one. That extra leverage is very useful. Alright, that's done. The front of the car. I'm going underneath on the driver's side. That's the left front wheel. And the next step is to get the alternator, or that's the starter bolt out, and then this bracket. That's the bracket first, and then the starter bolt behind. And after that, we gotta disconnect this power steering line. It's hooked up here, and then these bolts that connect the transmission to the bell housing, 1, 2, 3. We gotta remove that. And possibly this is a little different, this model. It's not like a dog bone. It looks like a dog bone, but I had to remove that. Maybe I need to remove those 2 bolts there to completely disconnect it. Get the axle out, and then use the transmission jack to drop it. See remove that, and then the bracket for the starter that holds the power steering line. This is how it looks. It goes back like so, like that. Stays like that. Finally got the bottom starter bolt. I had to use the cheater bar from the top, and then I was able to crack it open. Sits out. That's one long bolt. So now that's out. The remaining few more bolts. Actually, I have to get the axles disconnected. That's the triple square. So that's next. The starter is out. There's the flywheel right there. And let's take a look at the starter. There it is. It's a pretty long bolt. Getting the axle on the driver's side out. It's I think M10 triple square. That's off. Let's go to the next one. There's the next one. The next one, a couple of more, be done on the driver's side. Just completed removing the M10 triple square bolts on the passenger side axle. So now it's loose. Both the driver's side and passenger side axles have been disconnected, and I have this Pittsburgh transmission jack ready, and a few more bolts, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, about 7 or 8 bolts, and then should be ready to bring the transmission down. There's two 16mm bolts removed. Looks like I may have to remove those two bolts too. It's still tight. The long bolts goes towards the rear, like so, and then the short one right here. So I have to remove those two because this doesn't move. I removed two 13mm bolts, one in there, one on the rear, and this whole unit comes off like so. The orientation like this. I'm just gonna leave it on there. Now looking from the front underneath the car. Now the clutch has, the transmission is disengaged. Now I'm sitting on the transmission jack. I have to slowly lower it. Then I can access the flywheel and the clutch assembly inside. Removed this mount because I'm having a hard time dropping the transmission. So 3 16mm bolts. The right side one is the longest, and also the axle is kind of stuck there. I may have to remove that to make it easy. It might make it a lot easier, I guess. It was really hard to get the transmission to drop with the axle kind of hindering them from coming out at an angle. So I had it tied up a little high up, pulled up and tied. I was trying to remove, but this was too difficult. So finally I have the transmission dropped. Looks like it's the clutch is all burnt inside. I can smell it. I cleaned the transmission, put the new clutch in, and get this thing put back. Hopefully it's not that difficult putting it back on. This is very, very useful. I can raise this jack another foot or so. Maybe I'll do that. I think the throat bearing or the release bearing has kind of worn out. Put a new one in. Otherwise, I can see a lot of dust from the disc. It's all dust. I think when the slave cylinder gets pumped with the brake fluid, you press the clutch pedal, this gets pushed through this, and then that pushes the clutch in. So that's the thrower brake. It's pretty simple to replace. And then it comes out like this, pushing the clutch plate as a pressure plate, and then disengage the clutch, and then once you let it go, it'll go right back. Now it's time to remove the pressure plate. It's a 9mm spline socket. I think there's 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 5, and here's the last one. The axle is in the way. Now, I'm gonna use a smaller size. I got this toolkit from AutoZone, and the 9mm was hard to find size. Right, fell down. So there is the flywheel. It's a lot of. I mean, I can smell the burning. The burning smell now. When you look at the clutch disc, it's completely worn down. And I was, suspecting it to be oil from a leak, but doesn't appear so. But this material is completely gone. Absolutely nothing. And I think the flat side goes towards the flywheel, like so. All right, so the flywheel doesn't look that bad, but still I have a new one from LUK, and that one is the OEM, so it'll be better. But this one is a goner. So there's no friction material left. No wonder it was slipping so much. So here's the new clutch disc versus the old one. I mean, look at that. You can burn smell. And this is the OEM one. And the same side. I don't even know what brand this is. This says LUK from the right angle. Right there. That's the original OEM. This one is the aftermarket. And there's the black pressure plate, and that's the old one, worn out. Let's remove the flywheel bolt. This is not OEM, and then the bolts are typically double hex spline, but this one is a hex. It's an 18mm. One. Alright, I'm gonna remove the rest. Here is the old flywheel, and looking at the rear main seal, doesn't appear to be leaking, so I'm not going to replace it. There is a slight leak at the bottom, right on the right side. But that's not coming from the rear main seal. Maybe the grease from the other side. So even though I have a new seal, but I'm not planning to replace it. I think it looks good. Let's take a look at the transmission input shaft the seal. This lever comes out, just pull it off like this. This looks to be in okay shape, so I'm not gonna replace it. I'm just gonna clean it, and I don't see any leak coming from the input shaft, transmission input shaft. So that also I'm gonna leave. I'm just gonna clean this whole thing once I'm done with the clutch, and then put this back. All that dust is from the ground up clutch, cheap quality, and that flywheel is also not that good either. So to replace the input shaft shield, I had to remove this 3 Torx and take it off and put the new input shaft shield, which I have here. I'm gonna both the rear main seal and input shaft seal. That's the rear main seal, that's the transmission input shaft shield. They both look pretty good. There is no leak whatsoever, so I'm not gonna create a possible new problem. But I will be looking at the oil cooler. Looks like that is leaking. I decided not to change the rear main seal. It looks good. Check the torque spec, sprayed brake cleaner and cleaned it. It looks good. Now the next step is to put the flywheel, the new flywheel, the alignment pin, the clutch disc, and the pressure plate, and torque to specs. The new flywheel is in. Torque to specs is 44 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. That's done, and the next step is to use the clutch alignment tool, put the disc on and the pressure plate, and then torque. Then I'll be ready to move on to cleaning the transmission bell housing and the outside, and then hopefully put it back without much struggle. The clutch disc is in with the clutch alignment tool inserted. Make sure head spins freely there. And the next step is to get the pressure plate on. Clutch install is complete. The flywheel is in with the alignment tool, the clutch disc, and then the pressure plate, and the 6 9mm spline bolts torqued to 15 foot-pounds. And the flywheel itself is 44 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So we are all done here. And the next step is to clean up and put it back, which is going to be the tough part. The bell housing is clean. The clutch fork, I greased it and greased the splines. And there's a new throwout bearing, smooth, and it's ready to go. Made with the engine. There's the clutch right behind it. It was very difficult to drop the transmission when I removed it a few days ago, but now I have the new clutch in with the transmission jack. It was really hard to get it to line up, so decided to remove the flanges on both sides, and that should make it a lot easier to be able to line up and get it in place. So that's the next step. Taking the drive flange out from the driver's side. It's a 6mm hex. Yeah, that's all. And there is the heavy duty spring that needs to be pushed back in when mounting. So the output shaft shield seems to be in pretty decent shape, so I'm not gonna worry about that. But putting it back, I think this needs to be pushed in and then to screw. So some people use straps, but some say once it's mounted you should be able to push it with your hand. We'll see if it goes in. I have removed the drive flanges on both the sides, this unit, and This hopefully it's going to make it a lot easier to line up the clutch and the transmission. Let's see. Placing it. We're almost there, just a little bit more. All right. Well, after a lot of struggle, finally I have the transmission butted up against the engine, the bell house, and just threaded in one bolt. Gotta go back and finish the rest. Even after removing the flange, it was pretty difficult, but not as difficult as was trying to remove it with the flanges on. So I have to just secure it now and then add the flange and connect the axles, and then should be ready to move on to connecting the rest of the stuff. Finally, it's about time. I have the flange on the driver's side pushed in and installed, just a long pry bar to go against the axle that's hanging out there, and I was able to push it down and get the bolt started. Moving to the passenger side now. Here's the passenger side flange. I was able to use the pry bar against the exhaust and push it in and threaded the bolt in. What I have to do now is to torque the bolt and then move on to installing the axle, or actually secure the motor mounts at the top. It's a new clutch slave cylinder from Look, and here's the old one. Remove the pin from here, pull the line out, and maybe a little bit of brake fluid coming after that. Catch that, and then put the new one in. Let's see. Looks just what this is, a OEM. I'm glad it's the metal part here. Removing the pin from the old slave cylinder. It's a needle nose plier. Here's the old one, and the new one comes with a clip as well. New one. And the next step is to pull the line out. So just a slight leak. That's the old one. And not a lot of fluid. Right. Push the new one in. It's connected. And the new pin is on top. Push it in. Tap it, and once the pin goes in, and that's it. And the next step is to bleed, which I will do after I'm done with putting the rest of the thing out. So basically I'm done here. The new slave cylinder is in. I'm gonna put the clutch cables back, hook up the speed sensor and the airbox and the battery, and should be ready to move on to the next step. Here's the new clutch slave cylinder. It's in. Just have to tighten up and torque while pushing around, broke this connection, so I have to get a new one. It's a 3-way connection, actually 4-way. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Small one. This one is broken, very brittle. So I gotta go find this. But otherwise, that is done. Now the clutch levers are connected. This should be working okay. So I need to get a new this plastic 4-way joint, and then bleed the brakes. For that I have to hook up the battery. Everything else is in place. Here's the remaining work. I had to flush the transmission fluid, then change this plastic coolant pipe. This one's broken, so I'll change that and drain the coolant. I have to change the oil cooler, and then change the oil as well, then followed up with brake fluid flush, and then let's go adjusting the clutch cables, and that should be it. You should be ready to go. Well, I was trying to fix these cables. I broke off this coolant distributor line, so cleaned it up, and here's the old one broken, and here's the new one, dormant. So to start, I'm using removing this clamp using this Ostro tool. I remove this and this, and the clamp on the other side, and clean up and put the new one in. Here's the old one, all crusty, brittle compared to the new one. There. I clean this up and back it up. Complete installing the new coolant hose junction, and was missing this clamp, so I used the screw-on Western. But I'm gonna try to find out one from the Volkswagen dealership or Amazon. So this is done. I can go on to replacing the oil cooler. Before that, I have to drain the oil. Here's the hex on the drain bolt. There. A lot of this fluid drained when I removed the drive flanges on both sides, driver and passenger side. It's only a little bit here. So when I put on, I think it takes about 2 to 2.5 quarts of 75W90. Just pumped 2 quarts. Just at the end of the second one, it started dripping. So I think we are good. Have all valve in 75W90. So transmission fluid replacement is complete. And close that fill hole. Oil drain plug is 19 millimeter. Here's the 1/2 inch range. So that's a big bolt. The new clutch is in, everything is in place, coolant, oil, hooked up the battery, everything. Go ahead. Start it. Put it in reverse. Is it backup light? Yeah. Okay. It's working. Oh. It's all done. And go. It's backing up. New clutch. All back to normal. And first gear. Looks like it's all working good. How's it? New clutch, I mean.